Long ago, the American Southwest was not as dry as it is today. Many rivers and streams flowed through the land, creating green ribbons of life across the desert. These waterways were full and healthy, supporting a vast community of plants and animals. Trees like cottonwoods and willows grew thick along the riverbanks, their roots holding the soil firmly in place. This lush environment provided a home for fish, birds, and many other creatures. People also depended on these rivers, building their communities nearby and using the water for drinking and farming. The land was a balanced system where water was the most precious gift. But over many years, a great change happened. The climate grew hotter and drier, and less rain fell from the sky. The rivers began to shrink. At the same time, people began to use more water for growing cities and large farms, taking it faster than the rain could replace it. Without enough water, the river started to disappear. The once strong flows became weak trickles, and many streams dried up completely. The green ribbons that had crossed the desert began to fade, turning brown and dusty. It was a slow and quiet crisis, but one that would have huge consequences for everyone and everything that lived there. This loss of water deeply hurt the land and its inhabitants. The trees along the riverbanks, thirsty for water, began to wither and die. Without their roots to hold the soil, the banks started to crumble and wash away whenever a rare heavy rain did fall. This process, called erosion, carved deep cuts into the landscape, making the riverbeds lower and wider. The water that did flow sank deep into the ground, out of reach for most plants. This created a harsh cycle where less water led to fewer plants, which in turn made it even harder for the land to hold on to any water it received. The animals suffered greatly from these changes. Fish that once swam in the cool, deep pools found themselves trapped in shallow, warm puddles, and many died out. Birds that nested in the riverside trees lost their homes and their food sources. Larger animals, from deer to bears, had to travel much farther to find a drink, putting them under great stress. For people, the problem was just as serious. Wells that had provided water for generations went dry. Farmers struggled to grow crops in the parched soil. The drying of the rivers was not just an environmental problem, it was a threat to the very way of life in the Southwest. Faced with this growing crisis, experts knew they had to do something to save the rivers. They came up with plans that seemed logical and effective. One of their main strategies was to plant trees along the damaged riverbanks. They chose species like willows and cottonwoods, the same kinds of trees that had grown there naturally. The idea was that the new trees would grow strong roots, which would act like a net, holding the soil together and stopping the destructive erosion. They hoped these green walls would stabilize the banks and help the rivers heal themselves over time. So, teams of dedicated people went to work. They spent countless hours and a lot of money planting thousands upon thousands of young trees along the dry, crumbling riverbanks. At first, it seemed like a promising solution. The small saplings added a touch of green to the brown landscape, a sign of hope. However, the desert is a difficult place for young plants to survive. The intense sun, the lack of consistent water, and the poor soil made it a struggle. Many of the planted trees simply could not get enough water to establish their roots and grow strong. They withered under the harsh conditions, and the effort felt like a constant uphill battle. Another major effort involved building structures directly in the rivers. Humans tried to mimic what nature does by creating dams. These were not the giant concrete dams used to generate electricity, but smaller structures made of rocks, logs, and wire mesh. These man-made dams were designed to slow down the flow of water. The goal was to force the water to spread out, creating pools and wetlands. This would allow more water to soak into the ground, raising the water table and helping the new trees and other plants to grow. It was a hands-on approach to engineering a healthier river. But these human-built dams had their own set of problems. They were expensive to build and required constant maintenance. When a powerful flash flood came, a common event in the desert, it could easily tear these structures apart, washing away all the hard work in a single afternoon. The dams were often too rigid and couldn't adapt to the changing flow of the river. While they helped in some small areas, they were not a big enough solution for the vast network of streams across the Southwest. The problem was simply too large, and the human solutions were not powerful or widespread enough to make a lasting difference. After years of limited success, some scientists and conservationists proposed a bold and unusual idea. Instead of humans trying to rebuild the rivers, why not bring back the original river engineers? They suggested reintroducing beavers to the desert streams where they had once lived. For centuries, beavers had been trapped for their fur, and they had disappeared from most of the Southwest. The idea was that if beavers returned, they would naturally do the work that humans were struggling to accomplish. They would build dams, create wetlands, and restore the rivers all on their own, and do it for free. This idea was met with a lot of doubt. Many people thought it was crazy. Beavers in the desert, they asked. There aren't enough trees for them to eat or use for their dams. The streams are too weak and dry. The beavers won't survive. Ranchers were worried that beavers would flood their pastures or cut down the few valuable trees that remained. The landscape looked so damaged and barren that it seemed impossible for an animal that depends on water and wood to make a home there. The proposal to bring back beavers seemed like a desperate and unrealistic gamble to many. But the supporters of the idea knew that beavers are incredibly special animals. They are what scientists call ecosystem engineers, meaning they actively change their environment to suit their needs. A beaver's main goal is to create a deep pond where it can be safe from predators like coyotes and mountain lions. To do this, they build dams. Their powerful teeth can chew through trees, and they use the logs and branches as the foundation. They then pack mud, rocks, and plants into the structure, making it incredibly strong and watertight. This instinct to build is so powerful that beavers will work tirelessly to create a pond. What makes beavers truly remarkable is their ability to build even in very difficult places. They don't need a big flowing river to get started. They can begin their work in a tiny trickle of water, a place humans might overlook. They will find any available wood, even small shrubs or dry sticks, and start building. As their small dam begins to hold back a little water, the ground around it gets wetter. This allows new plants, like willows, to start growing. The beavers then use these new plants to make their dam bigger and stronger, which in turn creates a larger pond and allows even more plants to grow. It is a powerful cycle of restoration. With cautious optimism, the first groups of beavers were released into carefully chosen sites in the Southwest. Scientists and volunteers brought the animals in special cages and set them free near the trickling remains of desert streams. People watched and waited, wondering if the skeptics were right. What happened next was astonishing. The beavers did not give up in the face of the dry, damaged landscape. They immediately got to work. They found what little wood was available and began constructing small dams, sometimes starting with just a few sticks across a narrow channel. The results were slow at first, but they were steady. The small beaver dams began to pool the trickling water. Instead of disappearing into the dry ground, the water spread out, creating small ponds. These ponds began to transform the land around them. Seeds that had been dormant in the dry soil for years suddenly had enough moisture to sprout. Green shoots of sedges, rushes, and willows began to appear. The air, once filled with dust, now carried the scent of damp earth and new life. The beavers were not just building dams, they were reawakening the entire ecosystem, one stick at a time. As the ponds grew, the benefits multiplied. The stored water began to seep deep into the ground, recharging the underground aquifers. This raised the water table, making water available to plants far from the pond's edge. The ponds also acted as natural filters, cleaning the water, and they served as giant sponges, holding back water during floods and releasing it slowly during dry times. This created a more stable and reliable water supply for the entire area. Soon, other animals returned. Frogs and fish appeared in the ponds. Birds flocked to the new willow thickets. The land was becoming vibrant and alive again. Today, these beaver-restored areas stand as powerful symbols of hope. They show that nature, when given a chance, has an incredible ability to heal itself. The beavers have succeeded where expensive human projects struggled. They are tireless, adaptable, and perfectly designed for the job of river restoration. While the challenges of drought and climate change in the American Southwest are still immense, the beaver offers a practical and inspiring path forward. By working with these furry engineers, we may yet be able to bring back the green ribbons of life to the desert and secure a healthier, water-rich future for all.